All right, let's get going then. So here's things I'm not going to talk about, but people sometimes think I'm going to talk about. I've known a lot for work I've done around user research, and I've been writing some heavily opinionated tweets throughout the day around that. And somebody, at least one person here, won a copy of Interviewing Users? A couple, okay, excellent. Wow. That's great. If you didn't win a copy and you want to learn more about user research, you can go to the URL for the book, and there's lots of bits and pieces you can use, templates, more presentations. Buy the book if you so choose. I'm working on another book for Rosenfeld Media that comes out next year. It's about war stories, which are the things that go wrong when you go out in the world to talk to users. You can read about them on the page for that, and there's also a URL for the website where I've got, I think, 75 different stories that people have collected. And the last thing that I won't talk about that I'm telling you about is a podcast that I've been running called Dollars to Donuts. Anybody? Couple people, a handful of people here and there. Again, if you're interested in user research, this is people who are leading user research inside typically larger organizations and are talking about what's it taken to adopt and kind of drive change through that tool. So if that's of interest to you, you can check that out. And since I mentioned tweeting, I'm not able to do a callback, but I used TweetDeck and set up a lot of tweets to go through this talk. Things that are mentioned in the slides will be tweeted, and then there's a pretty substantial kind of supplementary reading list of other topics. So if if you're interested in what we're talking about, there's lots more to see. It'll be under me, @StevePortigal, and the hashtag InteractLDN. So I'm going to talk about presence and explore a little bit what that means. What are some of the terms we use? Why is it important in creative work? Why are we talking about this here today? We'll have exercises and reflection, and then we'll talk about how to develop it. This is an agenda. This is sort of what stuff is going to come up in this session, kind of all smushed together. So presence has kind of got a formal definition. I mean, there's many, but one of them to look at is this idea of being aware of and connected to the present moment and only the present moment. And I'll offer a sort of a supplementary definition that I think I find more helpful in terms of how I'm able to use this as an idea to help me. And that's really about awareness of what's going on in your head, being aware of your own thoughts and your feelings so that you can make choices about what to do. It's not about denying or suppressing those feelings, but it's about being connected to what's going on in your head. I think a lot about this in interviewing as a specific process where you're very much engaged in a very intense external activity where you're talking with somebody and really trying to listen with your whole being to them. But if you run user research, you know that you have a pretty aggressive interior monologue going on around what to ask next, how much time do we have, is my client paying attention? That's an interesting thing I think we should follow up. The cat is on my feet, whatever's going on. You have a lot of things to kind of manage, and those seem like they're kind of counter to the notion of presence. But what can happen for me sometimes is that when that outer focus on the person and that kind of that intensive interior monologue and kind of planning voice happens, sometimes, I don't know how to achieve this, I'll just tell you that it happens for me. Sometimes that kind of turns into a flow state where, and the best description I have for flow state is kind of like there's another gear that you kind of shift down to where like things go much slower and you have all this space. It's like you found like another sort of time zone that's slightly below the one that you normally live in. And it feels like things are going very quickly, but yet things have slowed down a lot. And I think that's sort of this state of presence where you have kind of processed a lot of kinds of things that, again, seem very counter to, if you think of presence as sort of more about emptiness, this is really quite counter to it. It's quite a manic state that somehow kind of resolves itself into something that is very liberating and free. And it's, we've been talking about creativity in different ways. I think this is sort of an element of being very connected and present to a thing that's happening and finding something that kind of opens up. Does anybody, I don't have a prize for you, does anybody catch the visual reference here? Is it just too obscure or too nerdy? Could somebody help me out? Simon, no, this is not you?
Put my glasses on.
Oh, okay. So there's an album called Presence. It was like an obscure Led Zeppelin album, and obscure enough, everyone's like, whatever.
And I'm even old enough, but I didn't get it.
Yeah. You like gave up after Houses of the Holy, right? Yeah. Okay. Another obscure Zeppelin joke, okay? And I think we better move on before God knows what happens. When people you hear these words used together, presence and mindfulness, at the level of specificity that I want to get in or that I have even mastery of. Let's just kind of consider them as interchangeable-ish kinds of words. You hear meditation as a word that's thrown in as well that kind of is a verb that ties to these nouns. We'll unpack a little bit. If there are information architects in the room, they may find themselves still frustrated, but because I'm not going to get to that fully satisfactory definition. I think today we can just kind of explore a little bit. And so, in terms of how meditation is presented, it's, if you want to do a thing to achieve mindfulness, you meditate. I think that's sort of the simplest notion that's out there. But, what I find really interesting is if you look at people who do meditate, they don't usually say, I meditate. They say, I have a meditation practice. And that doesn't mean they have a storefront with a shingle where you can come in and get some meditation. It means that they're engaged in this activity. And practice, to me, is such a wonderful word. It's not about the state that you've achieved. It's the idea of doing kind of repetition over and over. It's like a muscle building thing. You might, kick a football or something like that. You might do something over and over and over again, with the intention of developing mastery, but it's this repetition. Is there anybody that would identify themselves as having a meditation practice in this room? Cool. I don't know. I say about 8 or 10 people. I do not. So I may look to you guys a little bit in this, especially when we get to the discussion. All right, so let's do, here's my dog picture. I'm going to call this a nano meditation, and I'll explain it in a second. I really loved this definition. Because I think if you are new to the notion of meditation, your assumption is that you're going to clear your mind of everything and exist as this just vibrating zero or something. And it's really not about that. So I don't want you to try to accomplish that and then feel like you've failed. That's not what this little exercise is supposed to be. I like this. It's not about the absence of thought. It's the presence of awareness, which you can either go, what? Or wow, whatever. That's what we're going to play with it. So I'm just going to give you a little assignment. It's not going to hurt. Although if it does, you can report back on that. I want to just take 60 seconds. You can close your eyes or not. And that scared one person off. It's a good time. That's okay. It's whatever works. Take 60 seconds. Just try to be physically comfortable if you can. Don't, think about there's that narrator voice in our head that's kind of talking about what we got to do. Like, think about, can you let that voice kind of slow down a little bit? So I'll just give you 60 seconds, eyes open or closed, and I'll come back to you in 60 seconds and we'll talk about what the experience was. All right. What, if anyone wants to offer, what did you just do? What happened? Relaxed?
I'm very aware of my own breathing.
Breathing. Excellent. Okay. Have you done this before?
Not really, no.
Breathing is a thing that gets talked about. I'll mention it in a moment. That's great.
Listen to the silence.
Listen to the silence. Wow, that's quite profound.
Brings back a sense of calm and perspective.
In 60 seconds, you got calm and perspective. That's fabulous. Anybody else? Anybody, do you want to do any counterexamples? Anybody that felt like, ugh, yeah.
I had to cough and I felt really not good, and so I didn't, and now I'm struggling.
I heard you cough right at the end. Did you cough during?
I waited.
You waited? Oh, so that pulled you all the way out, because all you're thinking is like, I have to cough. Yeah. Anybody else find a challenge in that they want to share? Now we're like totally tuned into that. Yeah. What are you going to do? That's good. You have to cough. At least you're not mic'd. Okay, that's great. Those are good. I think those are good comments. And for people that have a meditation practice, what's a typical duration that you might meditate? Did you say you do? What might you do in a time when you go to do it?
I try to do like 5 to 10 minutes in the morning to kind of straighten my head out, because I have a 5-and-a-half-year-old, so you can imagine what that's like.
Yeah.
And then on the weekend I'll do it a little bit longer.
And sometimes it can be. I mean, when I've gone with my wife, it's like about a 30-minute thing, and that's not even. I think you can go much longer.
Try not to think about the time.
So even the question, if it's not about the time, the question is, yeah. But I guess there are like timer apps you can get to meditate that are very much about like setting you off and then waking you up or bringing you back. Great, thank you for doing. That's kind of a weird thing to get asked to do, and I like that. Even in 60 seconds, people were good observers of themselves and experienced some interesting kinds of things. So I kind of hinted at this before, that this idea of practice, I think practice is probably more the key word than meditation is. Again, sort of the default assumption is you meditate to get to presence. But I think finding things that are meditative, that help you get into that state, and some of the things that people were describing, the calmness, the stillness, kind of hearing the silence. Those don't have to be flow moments, but they're kind of tied to that. So here's a picture of a band that I'm a big fan of, and there's a lot going on there, but it's just clear how much those guys are in the zone, kind of in this performance. So you could consider something like that as a way to develop presence. I mean, you can't do what those guys are doing without being extraordinarily in that moment and just that moment. Just look at what's on their faces and their body language. I mean, so imagine doing something like that. It's completely different than meditation, but that practice is a way, again, to develop a facility about being connected to just that moment. What about sketching or painting? I've heard about people that work on a pottery wheel, and they find that to be kind of a meditative activity that helps them with presence. Gardening, running. Are there runners in here? Does it match some of what we're talking about? Yeah, right. It doesn't have to, but it can. It's a state that you can get to. And I'm sure there's many different ways to run and kind of things that you choose to accomplish in running. Cooking, I've heard cooking described as something that is kind of a practice where you kind of just go into it and experience just it. And again, cooking, just like interviewing, there's a lot of tasks that exceed just that moment. Just like, leading a concert, there's things that have to happen after that you have to balance and work against. But sort of finding the flow moment amongst all that juggling, I think, is a really interesting way to think about it. So it's not just about meditation. I think our exercise highlighted some of the things that can happen, but there's more there's more ways to get there. This notion is clearly of presence, of mindfulness. It's really in the zeitgeist. This is an article from Wired. Corporate America's loving this. I don't know about here, though I can guess. Let's see, Intel, LinkedIn, Google, Target, Ford, General Mills, they all have mindfulness programs, and that's by far not the complete list. And it's interesting, they talk about reduction in anxiety as kind of being the hook. But the reason these businesses are doing it is there's a sense that there's a competitive advantage that they can take on. And probably this is something we could unpack and debate. I don't have a strong point of view about it. I just think it's interesting that things get co-opted, and it's good that they get co-opted because they get driven forward, but do they change kind of the original intent? I don't know. I don't want to say it's bad, but it's challenging. There's a thing that goes on in our world, and we talk about this all the time. And look at the room. We're all on devices. I've been on my device all day. It's kind of what we're doing. It's what we're doing all the time. Sherry Turkle has a new book about this. There was a piece in the New York Times that I just tweeted. And just a quote from that article, 89% of cell phone owners said they had used their phones during the last social gathering that they had been part of. And 82% felt that the way they use their phones in social settings hurt conversation. So it's a thing going on in society now. We do this, and we don't necessarily think that it's the best thing. And there's, we talked earlier today about, concepts like addiction. I mean, it's complex. It's hard to sort of say, well, just put your phone down and be present. Like, there's things that are pulling us away from it. This notion of ubiquitous technology was kind of this promise of invisible technology, but it's interesting to see about as there's more technology, kind of the demands that it's introducing and that we're responding to. So it challenges us to be present because, among many other things, whether it's 5.5-year-olds or life, the technology has kind of crept in there. So it's challenging for us, but we're also in the business of whether we're doing this or things that relate to this. So we also have to think about, what does that mean for the things that we kind of put out in the world and ask for people to do. Here's this. Here's a nice unpacking of mindfulness, and it's the 7 attitudes of mindfulness, which I've kind of paraphrased here. And what I like about this list is that it really draws the connection for me between a lot of what we do and how we think and this. So I said I would talk about why is this important in creative work. Beginner's mind, and this is, I don't know if we've heard that phrase so far, but certainly that notion has come up in a lot of the presentations, that idea of approaching people or approaching a problem without knowing what the solution is. These last few pieces here, the last few seem very similar, but not. I liked the example about putting social features into a map that no one really wanted, and then finding something new emerge from it it turned out to be this really delightful feature that provided a lot of insights. That works when you don't kind of clench onto what must be and what is going to be, and you have more openness to things. Yeah, I don't know what else I want to say here. And I just think that these mindfulness attitudes are kind of in opposition to a lot of what we're asked to adopt in the business world to be successful. You have to be committed, you have to have vision, you have to know what the outcome is going to be. And, let's give it up for passion, but vision, I think, is a bit of a two-edged sword because the world is messy and complex, and if you decide what it's going to be and then march towards that and shut off all the input, that's, if you fail to be present, in other words, you miss opportunities. You don't introduce the social feature, and you don't understand, as those guys did in OS, all the ways that this data was playing roles in people's lives. This is something that's important. I liked how Alan Cooper puts it. You have to get out of yourself. And it's interesting to think about, like, our words. I think it shows how kind of slippery this concept is that, is this about being fully inside ourselves? Presence is sort of this internal thing, but, Alan's kind of saying, like, getting out of your own head, getting away from yourself, and yet at the same time, it's also being about coming right back to yourself. just a story here. Some experience I had in field work fairly early in my career. We were, the product we were working on was water. It was a fairly simple idea, but it was fairly interesting to see what it meant to people. And my colleague and I went to the home of someone who'd been given them this product to use for a while, and we went into the house and sat down with her. She said, she started telling us what was going on in her life, and she said, well, so I've been dealing with breast cancer, and I've recently had surgery, and then went on to talk to us about how she'd been using this water, and it was really something she chose to see as healing, and she talked to us a lot about this. She was young, she was very, very young, and we were also very young, and I had never walked into someone's house and had them say to me, I have cancer, and I did not know how to respond. I didn't know how to feel about it, how to think about it, how to act about it. And I think what the implicit decision that my colleague and I made was not to respond socially. So, and this is going to vary by region, but the social response is to say, or oh, or I'm sorry, is to put this whole thing in, to offer, and we do that as we think we're offering support to somebody. And so there's these social norms that get established, and we didn't do any of this. We didn't walk away. We didn't, we sat there and we were extremely present with her and listened to her. We just didn't put our thing into it. And that is hard and that is scary, and I have used that as a story when I've been teaching people about doing interviewing, and I've had people get very upset with me and tell me that that was a very inhuman thing to do, to not be caring and giving with someone. And it's, it's an interesting thing to kind of debate. I mean, the way I look at it was, that wasn't what she was asking for. We listened to her, and we listened to her talk about her cancer and her water, and we asked her follow-up questions. We gave her a lot. And I really think if you go, I'm sorry, that's about you. It's about you, and it's not about the other person. And as my colleague said to me, validating is judging. That's not accepting. Accepting is just accepting. It's like, that is how it is. You have cancer. Validating is saying, like, that must be tough to have cancer. Well, that's about you and what you think. And so this, this notion of presence and these mindfulness principles, they get very personal and kind of complex, but they come up in these situations when we're dealing with the real world. And so kind of associated with that, I'm not going to play this video, but I encourage you to check this out. People know this. It's the Brené Brown sympathy versus empathy. Yes. Yes. It's being tweeted somewhere around now, so if you don't want to copy this down, just go find it in the tweet stream. It's really quite good. Good endorsement. Thank you. From the New York Times, studies suggest that a lack of presence impairs your ability to empathize with others. The more in touch with my own feelings and experiences, the richer and more accurate are my guesses of what passes through another person's mind. Feeling what you feel is an ability that atrophies if you don't use it. I mean, this is what we're trying to do in our work. How many people have said, learn about, understand, connect with these other people. If you don't know who you are and what you're feeling, if you're not present, if you can't hear yourself, if you can't feel what's going on in your own head, you don't have the skills you need to connect with other people and understand them and make things for them. I think that's it's spelled out quite nicely here. And so here's the empathy word, this word that is very hot for us in the last couple of years. And mindfulness is a tool that helps us develop that. Recognize and accept that you have biases. Develop the capacity to observe yourself in action and notice when certain people or circumstances serve as triggers. Learning to slow down your decision making, especially when it affects other people, can help reduce the impact of bias. It can be particularly important when we are in circumstances that make us feel awkward or uncomfortable. This is about learning from users. It's about many things. It's certainly about learning from users. When people express preferences or they don't know how to do something we think they should know how to do, here comes all of our judging. They're not saying don't judge. They're just saying learn to listen to yourself, be present with your own feelings and emotions, and don't just react, but kind of catch yourself. That's how presence helps you connect with other people and understand what's going on with them. This is why this is an essential skill. One last one kind of in this vein. It's kind of about the notion of practicing. Again, you develop a facility for something by practicing it. It's human nature to first experience and then explain. Catching ourselves before we engage in our default reactions is one of the greatest challenges of our lives. But when done relentlessly and with discipline and moments of reflection, mindfulness ensues. The pursuit of self-awareness is difficult and requires dedication. So they're saying that you can reach this level of mindfulness by practicing not having your default reactions. So being more proactive than reactive and hearing yourself, listening to yourself, and seeing how you're processing the world around you and making choices around that, opens up something like really, really difficult and really, really important. It's not like a binary thing like, oh, now I've got it. It's a way to think about who you are in the world and with the people that you're with and everything that you think and do. Just that. There's a whole piece here about mind and body, and Anjan, I don't know if this is exactly right, but your discussion of looking at art while holding on to something physically that there's a change in how you experience and process it. To me, that's an interesting mind and body piece, which you could deconstruct much more richly than I can here. But this is, I find, very personally challenging. I'm very much in my head. I'm not in my body. And they talk a lot in mindfulness stuff about, in fact, I wrote down here, it has you emphasize your breathing as the simplest, most elemental aspect of existence. So I love that you brought up breathing as kind of a thing. And often when you're being taught to meditate, what is it? Focus on your breath. You just focus on your breath. It's this very simple thing. Again, I struggle with this. But I'll offer you guys an exercise here, which is not really about meditation. It's just about getting out of your head and into your body. And if you're in situations where you feel anxious or you feel like a sense of loss of control, and so you are starting to spiral away from the moment, one thing you can do is just like inventory or audit your body. So, and you can do this right now while I'm describing it, like, what is your elbow feeling? What is your feet feeling? And it's really just to send your head out there to kind of pull the regions and just say, like, oh, like as I'm talking, I can feel the insides of my shoes. Like, I just can feel it. So that takes you out of your head and into your body. And that's a thing that you can practice. And again, this is about practicing and repeating and developing the facility, having some tools that you can use in different circumstances to help develop that. This definitely comes up in listening. And so here's two different body languages that signal to the rest of the world, are you listening or are you not listening? What I think is interesting around mind and body and listening, and I mentioned this, I think, at the workshop for some of the people that were there, but in Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, he talks about, there's a chapter called The Naked Face. And it's about these scientists that are trying to map the different muscle groups that signal different emotions, and they are spending their days manipulating their faces and then trying to figure out what muscles are kind of tied to those emotional expressions. And they find on the day that they are dealing with sad emotions, they're making their face sad, and they feel bad when they go home. So what they go on to talk about, and I've seen other research that talks about this, that your physical state can actually induce emotions back into the body. And that's so counter to sort of my childhood learning, where emotions are kind of felt and then kind of make their way through the body and then they're expressed. But the idea that we can actually induce things from our physical being all the way in goes in the other direction. So again, this connection between mind and body is richer than maybe we are kind of defaulting to think about. Yeah, I think I kind of gave on my rant about how business people are kind of taught to think. Yeah, we can skip that. I want to do another exercise. This is an exercise in pairs, so if you're not near somebody else, maybe you can move for this. It's a very quick exercise, so you can come right back. I want to talk a little bit about the idea of it's going to be okay. And this is a simple thing. When you feel like it's not going to be okay, that takes you away from the moment. And sometimes it's helpful just to consider the fact that it's going to be okay. So what I'd like you to do is be very quick with this exercise. With a partner, think about something that you have a concern about. It's not that you have an itch, and I think there's a continuum here. Over here is you have an itch on your foot, and over here is the world is going to end. The exercise won't work if you go to either end point. Just go to someplace kind of the middle. It can be real or not. Tell them a simple thing that you're thinking about that maybe is like a lowercase w worry. The partner, just say to them, it's going to be okay. And you say, okay. Then switch. That's the whole exercise, okay? And then we'll talk about it. All right? Go. Should be on your second one now, for sure. Dun, 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 dun. All right. So just like with the nano meditation, I want to get just some quick reactions from people. How did that exercise go for people? And again, I'd like to hear where it worked. I'd like to hear where it didn't work, or what your thoughts were. Who has some reflections here?
Well, a big part was just getting over the fact that somebody I'd met and spent a little time with, and to go, I'm going to bring something out, caused a great deal of anxiety, and I had to go to that trust place.
Mm.
And then when you did say it was going to be okay, I felt relief both in hearing that, and then I felt heard.
Nice. That's quite meta. Thank you. Somebody else.
I'm not sure that you're right, because I said it's going to be okay, and straight away started to say, but you can do this, you can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think of that as like a yes and. If you think about improv, it's yes, it's going to be okay. And in fact, maybe I'm just going to give you a break. You helped find ways for it to be okay. You went beyond the exercise. If we were to do it again, you might want to try it. Just what's it feel like for yourself to just offer this support without the facts? This is a whole gender thing, which we don't need to get into, and I'm already uncomfortable I brought it up, but good. So somebody give another example and save me here. It's going to be okay, Steve.
I felt it was insincere. I don't trust someone else to tell me that my situation is going to be okay.
So was that about their insincerity or your own parsing of it?
Their insincerity.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's just saying it because she has to say it.
Yeah.
Not because it's actually going to be okay.
That's a fair reaction. I mean, this exercise is totally constructed, and I think it's, I thought it would be better to have somebody else tell you that it's going to be okay rather than tell yourself. And I think probably among us there's a difference about which one we're willing to hear. I mean, you often hear people say, like, they can take compliments, but they can't give it to themselves. So you and where you're at, that maybe it's better if you say, if we're going to do it again, I'd say you tell yourself it's going to be okay. But good. That's a fair critique of and I think that reveals just how complex this is.
Also, that notion of the process where you having to tell somebody else almost realises that thought in your head and enables you to tell yourself it's okay as well.
So you got, by verbalizing it, you turned it back on yourself as well?
Yeah, so also, not necessarily in this situation, but I know in other situations where I would have done that before, just the fact that I've got it all sort of off my chest and told somebody else, hearing them say it's going to be okay makes me, enables me to believe that it's going to be okay.
Yeah. So kind of a counterexample to what you were saying, maybe. Again, we're individuals, and this is different for all of us, and it's a... Who's not an individual? Yeah. Anybody else?
Just saying it out loud helped me evaluate how I felt about the problem as well, and maybe start to think, I thought it was a 4, actually it's a
Interesting. So wait, when you said it out loud, it changed how you felt about your own situation. Interesting. Good. You guys did, look what you got out of like 90 seconds of playing with a couple of phrases. That's good. Thank you. So kind of related, here's an outcropping, I think, from, oh, another dog thing. I must like dogs. It's a relationship, it's in relation to it's going to be okay, is this notion of the reframe. So here's the scary dog in the neighborhood, and when Brody, who you saw in the other picture, whenever we would walk by, this dog would like charge at the fence. You can see kind of the grating on the top there is new. That's because they kept having to replace it because this dog, Bodie, would just like break through it and just like bark and bark and bark and bark. And so my dog would kind of cower, right? Would just be kind of uncomfortable, like I don't know what to do. And we would like sort of worry about going by there. It would upset him, you know. And like, what are you going to do about this barking, scary dog in the neighborhood? He was on the route where we walked, and so that kind of happened every day. And one day, I just decided to treat Bodie like a dog instead of like a scary monster. And I said, you know that voice we use to talk to dogs? Go get your ball. And I didn't know that Bodie had a ball. I just said something to him. And this is the weirdest thing, but this is true. Bodie runs off, and I'm like, okay, I guess that's it. And he comes back over the fence, like, with his ball. and I realized, oh, Bodie's a dog. He's not scary. And the reframe was all about me, right? I had all these assumptions about who he was kind of in my relationship to him through Brody, my dog. And it was just this kind of magical moment where I saw my assumptions. It was like, I don't know, the clouds parted, and I decided to kind of step outside of that world I'd been in and try something else after months and months and months. And you know, and then it changed our relationship kind of on an ongoing basis as we would go by there. Like, this is not from that day. This is from some other day where like Bodie was there with his ball. Like it didn't eliminate the problem, but it completely reframed it for all of us. And so, you know, there's a whole area of therapy, and not that what we're talking about is doing therapy, but there's a thing we can kind of learn from with CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. Is that a familiar term to anybody? Yeah, and so CBT basically is about negative thoughts, and how if you have negative thoughts, it affects your behavior and it affects your feelings. But I think the powerful thing for us in this conversation to draw from it is this idea of reframing. And teaching you to catch yourself in the moment as you make judgments, like I was saying before from that, I think it was from the New York Times article, and ask yourself kind of in a brainstorming way, well, what else could it be? And so you hear stories from people like, oh, here's this conflict that happened with me, you know, I gave her this letter and she was so mad. But that's your own assumption, just like Bodie the dog. And so, you know, to ask yourself that question, well, what could be the other reasons for that? What else could have happened? And so that, you know, that idea of reframing, you know, being built into something like therapy, you just see how powerful reframing is to help you be in the world differently and kind of explore more possibilities. Again, it's a way to think about presence. So this is in our work situations. It's in our you know, this is a very interpersonal thing, but it also is a creative problem-solving tool. I mean, the reframe is exactly what designers do, right? Well, does it, you know, what color do you want this wall to be? Does it have to be a wall? Is like the classic designer thing. And so this reframe is such a powerful skill. You kind of see it everywhere. So I'm going to, just a couple of things to wrap up. Here's the source of the title for this talk. Marina Abramovic, people know of her. She's kind of I don't know, like the performance artist, you know, that if you think about what performance art is about. This is the movie on the left. I recommend this movie. It is fantastic and complex and interesting. It's about a piece she did at a career retrospective that she had at MoMA in New York the whole thing was called The Artist is Present, but there was this piece where, and you can see in that picture, she's sitting and just sitting still, and people from the audience, where their museum goers would come and they would just in turn sit across from her. There was no touching, there was no talking, there was no winking. It was just this ultimate stillness. And she did that for, I want to, like 3 months, like 6 days a week, 8 hours a day, for months and months and months. You know, and it's completely over the top, and yet it's like so incredibly profound. One of the things I tweeted was a link to a Tumblr called Marina Abramovic Made Me Cry, which I think is a bunch of photos of people weeping while they sit and talk with her. And so I didn't think we were going to get to this. As you can see, we're out of time for this exercise, but I'll just describe it to you, and then you can be like, thank God Steve is not making us do this. Because when I have a longer workshop that I do, and we do this, and it's I'll just tell you about it, and you can try it somewhere else. They use this in dancers do this, and couples therapy. It shows up all over the place. It's just sitting with someone and just doing what Marina Abramovic does, you know. And she did it all day. In workshops, I've asked people to do it. I've made them do it for like 60 seconds, which is just a tiny little bit. And then all these things kind of happen, and it's, you know, you guys already did 2 things that were a little weird and uncomfortable, and I appreciate that. And thank goodness I'm out of time. I don't have to make you do this. But at least take it as a thought exercise and just like try it with somebody at some point in the next 20 years. You know, I think you can see. So no pressure on you to kind of do that. So much to wrap up the thoughts here. Why did I want to talk to you about this? Present is this idea, and it's an empowering idea. It lets you be more effective in your work that's collaborative, in solving problems in a creative way, and learning about people. You know, so that's why. In terms of how, I think you have a lot of choice, and you're doing things already that kind of support this. So just to be mindful about how you pursue mindfulness. What can you do that's personally rewarding? That you want to do that lets you practice being present. Again, this notion of practice I think is really, really key, and that you can strengthen that skill. And it's tied into kind of it's about who we are and how we are in the world. And I think it has a lot to offer us. And yeah, there's some links to things, and it's all on Twitter right now. So that's it for me. Thank you very much for playing and trying these exercises and the great thoughts, and we can take some questions with what we have time for.
I just want to say, as someone that does meditate, and we can talk about that afterwards, I sometimes find the whole mindfulness thing a little bit kind of like, even though I'm someone that actually practices it. He says, revealing a little bit behind the curtain. But I must say, I think that is, and I've been to a few talks, and there are some talks, some people that you've named, that I will just avoid, like doing yoga in a conference is like, really? But that was excellent. That actually was the best I've ever been. And I sat there and I thought to myself, this is really good. You've made me reconsider stuff, so I'm going to give you a top touch.
All right.
Questions? Someone must have a question. Or are you all too present?
I already made everybody talk. Maybe we're all talked down.
I mean, we're going to go to the pub afterwards, aren't we? Are you going to come? Oh, excellent. We have a question.
Hello. So how have you developed self-awareness if you don't meditate? Or
what are some ways you can do it otherwise?
Yeah, how have you personally?
How me personally?
Something you're
I had to stop before we started. Like, someone's going to ask me that. You know, I mean, for me, walking around and taking pictures is a big thing. You know, the iPhone and, you know, putting pictures on social media, which gives me an output for that. Like, it structures that. You know, certainly when I travel, which is a sort of a dislocating experience, the thing that I find very grounding is to walk and just you know, walk and notice. And we talked about noticing a little bit in the workshop on Monday. Noticing is kind of, you know, going to details that you don't otherwise perceive. Because you can just kind of walk like this, and that is sort of my temptation. And so to look at people and sort of think about what's going on around me, and then find those moments to, like, you know, to shoot and to tell a story about. You know, not second by second am I present, but, you know, if I do that, if I go for an hour walk and get some things, like, I feel very, very different afterwards. So that's, in terms of a practice, I think that's probably my best answer.
Yeah, so hey, I'm glad that you brought this feeling different thing, because like, I would like to hear like your indicators of the state of the self-awareness, because sometimes, you know, you try, you meditate, you do lots of stuff, and you try to achieve something, but there's this question that comes to your head.
Right.
Is it yet?
Yes.
Like, is it the moment I'm present, self-aware, and all this stuff? Do you have any indicators that you can share?
Yeah, you may not like it, but it may help you as well. That's the wrong question. But by realizing it's the wrong question, I think it opens up. And because I think, like I was said briefly before, that we often think that meditation is sort of this, what I call like a vibrating zero or something like that. Like you just go to this state where you're free and nothing happens. But people who are experienced meditators will tell you that it's sort of it's allowing those thoughts to come in. So you know, don't have any thoughts. Thoughts come in, and then you think, oh, a thought is coming in. Oh, I shouldn't have a thought. That's why it's a practice. And so it's really about what do you do when that happens. And so one thing you can do is say, I suck. I can't meditate. I'm thinking about things. The other thing that you can do is say, it's okay. It's okay. Like, and not let that thought coming in fuck everything up for you. Like, it's okay. You know, and now you have another moment to try again. Now you have another moment to try again. And that's why that idea of practice as opposed to doing, I think, is helpful. So, and again, I also talked about the reframe. So yeah, your question is wrong, but if we reframe it, I think it reveals sort of what the indicator is. It's just doing that kind of practice and being okay with whatever happens. So if you meditate and you meditate shitty or great, either way you feel okay with how you've meditated, that's kind of your indicator right there. Does that help?
That's good. Right. Let's have one last question. If there are any more, if not, we're going to have a round of applause.
You have to pick, Simon.
Oh, I have to pick. Oh,
really want it. Really want it. Who really want? Oh.
Literally, it was like so close. You could have put a nano awareness thing between each other.
So yeah, thank you very much for a really cool talk. Just wanted to ask a question about, so I kind of get that being mindful helps me as a researcher and as a designer, but do you think at all that it's part of our responsibility as designers to help users be mindful? It's kind of unrelated to your talk, but maybe it's related.
No, it's not unrelated. I probably talked around that at least once, but you know, I think if that's a responsibility that you choose to take on, I think that's a wonderful one. I don't think it's for me to stand up here and say, you know, what I did say was understand the context in which people struggle to be present because of technology's encroachment. That I'm comfortable telling you. For me to say it's your responsibility and you should, I mean, who the hell am I to say that? Who are any of us to say, like, if that's something that's meaningful and we think we can do it, and we've heard a lot of different people talk about the kinds of impacts that they want to have, that they're passionate about, and so on. I'm not gonna dictate to you. But I think if that's for you, that's awesome. We do need more people to do that. I'm just not gonna tell you. I reframed it again.
We are going to have one last question for the lady with the green top, green jumper.
How would you describe flow versus mindfulness?
Yeah, remember at the beginning I said, like, if the definition stuff's going to get messy. I'm nervous about trying to answer that. Yeah, I think there's probably a right answer based on how those things are defined, and so I'm not trying to be too self-deprecating. I'm just not 100% certain. But I think, I mean, flow to me is a more dramatic state. Where time shifts, where you feel kind of, there's a certain joyfulness that comes. You're very engaged in an activity. You're kind of doing something. You know, mindfulness to me is more of an attitude to bring to everyday life. And this is my personal answer to it. And I, you know, if we were 10 people around a table, we would hear what everyone had to say about it. But I'll throw that out there, and you know, that's a pub conversation for somebody
Attitude, else. I like that. That's great. Please give a round of applause to our keynote, Steve.
Thank you.